Hello, my name is Donna Kane, and I'm the Executive Director of the Peace Liard Regional Arts Council. I'd like to begin by expressing our gratitude to Treaty 8, on whose territory we reside and work. I'm delighted today to be able to introduce the launch of Wayne Sawchuk's new book, Crossing the Divide, Discovering a Wilderness Ethic in Canada's Northern Rockies. The book tells the story of Wayne's transformation from logger to conservationist. And in 2007, while he was working on the book, he went to the Banff Centre for the Arts. And there he met acclaimed writer John Vaillant, whose much-loved books include The Golden Spruce, The Tagger, and Jaguar's Children. In their discussions during the residency, John decided that he would like to travel into the Musqueam. And so for a month, he went in on the trail with Wayne and gathered materials during his time there, and then published an article in the National Geographic in 2008. So with John's firsthand knowledge of the Musqueam, we couldn't be more delighted that he has agreed to serve as the facilitator today for the Q&A. Welcome, Wayne and John.
It's great to be here, and it's great to be with you, Wayne. Though this is the first time I think we've met virtually.
Indeed, it's been a long time since we've spent time on the trail, John. Way too long, I might add. Yeah. But at least we get to at least commune a little bit.
Yeah.
Through this electronic, I guess, sign of the times.
Anyway, good to see you, and especially on this auspicious occasion. So congratulations, first of all, on a wonderful book.
Well, thank you very much, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, I read it with interest and a certain amount of envy, and but not for every story. There's some hairy ones in there. This, you grew up really close to the divide of the Rocky Mountains, the northern end, and in your title is this idea of crossing the divide, and I don't think you're just talking about mountains there. And I'm wondering if you could unpack that a little bit for us.
Well, the divide is a metaphor, of course, for many of the divides that we encounter in our daily lives, and certainly that I encountered as I grew up. The divides, first of all, the Rocky Mountain, the physical divide on the Rockies itself, but there's also the divide between environmentalism and conservationism and hunting and trapping and taking animals, for instance. There's a divide between the perspectives of people on how the land should be used. Is it there for our purpose to exploit our human purposes, or is it there for itself? And does it deserve to be preserved for itself, essentially? So these are the kinds of divides I'm talking about in that title.
Well, honestly, I've traveled a lot and met a lot of people in the conservation world and the hunting world too, and I met very few people who are able to kind of mediate those tensions as gracefully and openly as you do. And it's something that's always fascinated me, and frankly really filled me with admiration, because it's a really difficult tension to manage. And your upbringing was so unusual in the sense that I really had the feeling, reading the book and also in conversation with you, that you grew up almost in another century. So many of your experiences seem to really come from the frontier and have a rawness and exposure, and in some ways a loneliness to them. And here you are, here we are on Zoom, deep in the 21st century now. And I'd like to know, what do you suppose it was about your upbringing, maybe some significant people in your life, or maybe your approaches to it, that have enabled you and encouraged you to be a mediator between these different worlds?
I think it just came naturally out of my growing up in the situation that I was in. I had a father who was a firm exploitationist, if you want to put it that way. He was the logger. He was a someone who did land clearing as a business, and we saw lots and lots of that kind of thing when I was growing up. The land was there to be used for my father and to make money from. My mother, on the other hand, had a softer, more gentle approach, and she believed that animals had an intrinsic worth and that they were there not just for our use, but basically had value in and of themselves. And I think that tension between my father's view and my mother's view was something that I had to mediate as a child growing up. Although I didn't realize I was doing that, of course. It was just the way things were. There was different points of view. And so my own life essentially has been a middle road between those two kind of extremes, if you want to put it that way, or those 2 points of view. And I think that's helped me quite a bit. Certainly when I, as a logger and a trapper and a guide and a hunter, that gave a pretty solid basis for the conservationist side of my activities, because it allowed me to see to know what the other side was feeling, or all sides were feeling on that debate, and to find a middle road through them. And I hope that's contributed to some of the things that have happened subsequently, including the Muskoka-Chica, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the Muskoka-Chica is kind of this elephant in the living room. It's this incredible creation, this incredible piece of land, piece of country, really. It really is, bigger than a lot of European countries. And you were instrumental in putting that together. And in that way, your ability to bring all these different stakeholders to the table and to stay at the table with them and not get polarized, somehow you've been able to embody so many of the different points of view in British Columbia. And I'm going to close the door. Okay, sorry. It's breakfast time in our house. I hope we can edit this a little bit. But your creation, this monumental achievement that you were so intimately involved with, the creation of the Muskoka-Chica special management area, is, to me, seems like kind of a crowning achievement for the province as well. And it's something that you talk about in your new book very eloquently. And you spend a lot of time in there to this day. And it's a place that I've been privileged to travel into. And I really had the feeling going through there that this must be what Alexander Mackenzie saw. This must be what Lewis and Clark saw. This must be what First Nations hunters and gatherers experienced pre-contact. It's just a remarkably powerful, intact place. And you still occupy that space, partly because you hold rights to a trap line in there. And how do you reconcile now, with, we're technically, in what a lot of people describe as a sixth extinction. There are a lot of intense pressures being put on the planet right now, and on British Columbia in particular. How do you reconcile your role as a guide with your role as a trapper and a wilderness advocate?
Well, this is a challenging balance, obviously, and when we were first looking at the Muskoka-Chica, it wasn't the Muskoka-Chica at that time. It was basically the Northern Rockies, which is just a big chunk of land that was open for resource extraction. But fortunately, there was many people who saw the value in the place, and I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous. First of all, it's like Banff and Jasper, but no roads and no people.
Yeah,
and that's a resource of amazing importance. 6.5% of the province is what it works out to, which is like 2 Vancouver Islands, right?
Amazing.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge, and there's very few roads running through it. The Alaska Highway runs through one corner. Mm-hmm. So there was a number of people, lots of folks, in fact, up here especially, who saw the value in protecting that place. And primary amongst those, I would give credit to George Smith, who he and I were partners in that campaign throughout the whole campaign from start to finish. And without him, I'm certain that the Muskwa-Kachika would not have been created. But there was lots of other people who felt that way as well. And for myself personally, the dichotomy, or the divide, if you will, between conservation and taking animals has been something that's occupied a good part of my thoughts. I mean, I think, it's often been said, or the sage has said, that the unexamined life is not worth living. And of course, I have had to take a look at my own, killing of wildlife, and as a trapper, and to reconcile that with the conservation side of things. Well, of course, when we go out there, I take a few martens. I could take any species at all. It's a requirement if you have a trap line to do that. Mm-hmm. But martens are solitary creatures. You're not harming their social structure when you take just a few of them. So, and there's lots of them out there on the land. So from that perspective, I would say that, ethically, I think I stand, it's okay. I think I've got that base covered. But in my book, I go into a couple of questions that I think each of us should answer if we're going to take a life, whether, of course, that's in this case, animal life. And I think, to cut a long story short, I won't go into those questions at this point, but I think for myself, I've answered both of those questions in the affirmative. And I think I'm on solid ground. I think that my use of the wildlife can be justified ethically. Mm-hmm. And from that perspective, although it's a challenge and many people may not agree with me, but I certainly would like feedback on that point, what people think about that. And yeah, it'd be interesting to hear from folks about that.
Well, it's really rich, a really rich and necessary subject, especially in BC. And I think you'd find yourself on common ground with, many settler hunters and many First Nations hunters and gatherers also. And that's part of the nature of being a human being on Earth is consuming resources, and whether we do it consciously or unconsciously is a really important question, and where a lot of the trouble comes up when we don't examine it, as you're suggesting we do. And I think that's one of the things that I've always admired about you, and I think that gives you so much credibility at the negotiating table when you're dealing with other stakeholders and other interests that a lot of people, particularly on the conservation side, often butt heads with. And you're able to build a bridge over to those people. And it's crucial, if we're going to find our way through this. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's something that, comes through in your book also. I feel like reading your book, I had this sense of, wow, there's a place in this book for every point of view. And, you have just this, a breadth of understanding, and especially of experience that really few of us frankly have, because of the way you were raised, and then the world that you've learned to negotiate since. And it's really extraordinary. You in the book refer to northeastern BC as the end of the frontier. And what does frontier mean to you, and what does the end of it look like?
Well, frontier is a fantastic place. It's a place with unlimited land, first of all, right? Unlimited resources. Mm-hmm. And those resources are there for one purpose, and that's for our use, to be exploited to the extent that we want to or feel like doing. And that approach, while it's wonderful, I mean, let's all be frontiersmen. It's a fantastic life. We have all the resources we want there for the taking. But the reality is that if we're going to reach a sustainable relationship with the natural world, we cannot operate on the frontier mentality. It's just too hard on the resources and too hard on the ecosystems and so on. We have to reach a sustainable balance with the natural world if we're ever going to exist in harmony. And I think that's what the land and resource management plans essentially did, is take that frontier and zone it for human use. Mm-hmm. And once that's done, the frontier is no more. We are now a zoned and managed landscape. And that transition, for many of us, I would call myself a frontiersman. I certainly grew up on the frontier, as did my father and most of us at that time. We were on the frontier. And so the passing of the frontier is a a pretty sad event for lots of us. On the other hand, it's extremely hopeful as well, because now we have a chance to manage or interact and be with the landscape in a sustainable way, to live in the landscape in a sustainable way. And I think that should be our goal as humanity, to occupy this earth in a way that's respectful of the plants and animals and ecosystems in which we reside. And I know that, in cities, most of us are divorced from that whole debate to a large degree. We don't interact with wildlife or the ecosystems on a daily basis in most of the world. And I think that hopefully my book will bring out some of the more, I guess, interactions with wilderness on a more personal level, and on a I guess a level that people can understand. That's my hope, at any rate. Mm-hmm. And chief among those is the end of the frontier, to actually experience a transition on the landscape, the like of which North America has been undergoing for a couple hundred years. This is the tail end of it now.
Yeah. Well, this idea of, I think typically when we think of, the end of something, there's a sorrow there, there's a finality, but really what you're suggesting here is, it may be the end of the frontier, but that was, in a lot of ways, a pretty one-sided and exploitive dynamic. And you're suggesting that it may be the end of the frontier, but it's actually the beginning of a new relationship. And that does seem very hopeful to me. And
that's absolutely right, John. Absolutely the way it has to be and the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, I think the question I want to end on, I mean, needless to say, we've spent a lot of time in the saddle and on the trail talking really ad nauseum, much to my delight anyway. And, but we've got to wrap it up here. And one of the things that has always fascinated me about you and just the way you live and your past is that you really seem like a time traveler. And I've seen your library. We actually have a lot of the same books. You have a wonderful grasp of natural history, of exploration history, and you have your own experience of actually, exploring places where very, very few, certainly Anglos, have ever been. And how does that make you, as an inhabitant of the planet, who, in my view, seems to have really occupied at least 3 centuries in your life, the way you've lived, how does it make you look at the world and feel about the world?
I think it gives me perspective. And when I travel to other places, we were recently in Croatia and also in Honduras, the United States, Eastern Canada. And when I travel to these places, I realize that we live in a human-dominated landscape for the most part. And we are now, consuming a huge proportion of the world's primary output, basically sunlight and land. Mm-hmm. And traveling in the Muskoka Chica has given me an understanding of what used to be here. And it also has given me a understanding of the value of these places that are still untrammeled and still not exploited by humans. Yeah. On our 1 to 50,000 map sheet on the Mayfield Lakes, it's only a few rivers and no peaks, no lakes are actually named on that map sheet.
Wow.
Officially.
Yeah.
We have not appropriated that landscape.
Yeah.
And I think that perspective shows me what the value is of these things. And, of course, we've concentrated on the ethics and the larger question, but I hope the stories are a ripping good read as well. And I know that there's some exciting stuff in there. For me, it certainly was. When I relive these experiences, my hair was standing on end on more than one occasion. Holy cow. Yeah. But looking back and seeing what has been accomplished and what's been done, I'm very happy with certainly the book and the publication and the way it turned out. And I hope other people will like it as well as I do.
Well, it's a remarkable read, and again, I had the feeling reading it of going back in time. And what's so amazing is that we can sit here and talk about it on Zoom, and yet, you know, when you read some of those stories, they really are like stories almost from pre-contact or early contact. And the fact that you're here with us, able to communicate those, and especially with such wisdom and perspective, is, you know, I feel lucky to be here with you. And I think,
and John, I feel pretty lucky too, as a matter of fact.
I mean, honestly, really, you're lucky to be alive, frankly, after some of those stories. And they, you know, it's a remarkable thing. So congratulations again. I really hope the next time I see you, it's in person and preferably on the trail. And I hope the festival is wonderful for you and everyone else who's joining us through whatever medium. So thanks
Well, thank you, John. It's a great pleasure to see you as well, and you know, to read your books has always been illuminating for me to the nth degree, and so it's a great pleasure to work with you on this one.
Excellent. Well, to be continued. Safe travels, and I'll see you down the trail.